Welcome to Navigating Consumer and Family Law Challenges. Insights from SoCal's trusted attorneys.
Hello, and welcome to Navigating Consumer and Family Law Challenges with Amanda Hill. Amanda is a trusted California attorney who helps clients protect their families and finances during divorce and custody disputes. I'm Heidi Mack, and today we're diving into a major change in California family law that took effect in September 2024 regarding how childcare costs are now split between parents. With inflation on the rise and daycare costs skyrocketing, this is one of the most important updates separating parents need to understand. This episode is The New Rules of Childcare Costs in California. Welcome, Amanda. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, let's get to it. What are these mandatory add-ons when it comes to child support in California?
Yeah, so in California, in addition to a monthly amount of money that's paid to support the children to the custodial parent or the other parent, there is what's called mandatory add-ons. They're mandatory, meaning that they're in addition to the child support amount. They include childcare, orthodontia, eye doctors, copays, so any out-of-pocket medical expenses, so to speak. It also includes any childcare related to when you need to go for a job interview or for working hours when one parent or both parents need childcare while they're working. And it's mandatory because those costs can be exorbitant, and regular child support, let's say, for example, is only $1,000 a month, but childcare is $3,000 a month. That's why there's a public policy that the courts in California established that said these additional costs need to be addressed and divided between the parents as well.
Interesting, interesting. So then how did the law change in 2024 regarding how the childcare costs are divided?
So in September of 2024, the courts in California came down and they made this law effect saying that prior, it was always split 50-50. The general rule of thumb was both parents were going to split those costs, those out-of-pocket costs 50-50, and that was it. Didn't matter what each side's income and relative financial status was. However, they did a review of that policy, and I think there was some pushback and feedback that that wasn't really fair when one parent maybe made 3 or 4 times what the other parent made. So what they did was they changed the law to say it should be allocated in such a way that is adjusted for each individual parent's income. So for example, now it's not always going to be 50-50, right? So there's going to be cases where it may be 75-25 or 60-40, depending on which parent makes more money and how that amount of income impacts the calculation that the courts run.
I mean, honestly, that makes sense to me. So, does this apply to daycare, after school care, or summer camps?
Yes, in general, it's going to apply to aftercare programs, daycare programs for children that are not yet in school. Summer camps, that's a little bit more of a gray area because summer camps, it's going to depend on whether the kids are going to the camp because it's in lieu of daycare and it's because the parents need to work, or if it's just a fun summer camp for them to go to learn science or whatever it may be. That would be usually considered by the court discretionary for that to be split. But if it is in lieu of daycare, then yes, absolutely would be considered something that would fall under that category.
I was going to say, because I'm so used to hearing about, quote unquote, summer camp, and that's not usually something that it's usually voluntary. But, as you said, I'd understand it could be in lieu of daycare. So that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So let's say, can one parent be held responsible if they refuse to pay their share?
Yeah, so the most important thing that I always, advise and give tips on is make sure you keep good records because the general rule is, and there's a whole form that the courts use to go over this, but the general rules and responsibilities as it relates to these costs is whoever incurs the cost has to keep the receipt, the invoice, proof of payment, and then provide it to the other parent. And then within 30 days, they have to reimburse the other parent whatever their portion is that they're responsible to reimburse. So if I'm going to give a simple example, if it is 50-50, then they have to pay half of that to the other parent within 30 days. Now, in practicality wise, sometimes the easiest thing is just they each individually pay the daycare their half of whatever the tuition costs are. And that makes it a little simpler. And then it doesn't kind of put one parent into a position where they're waiting. And then if they don't pay, then they have to go and take them back to court to enforce it, which that option is available, but it is kind of a pain to have to do that. I will say though, if you don't abide by those orders and you can show proof that you provided the proof, followed the rules, waited the 30 days, didn't get the payment, and you can show a consistent pattern of that, you always have the ability to go back to court and tell the judge that they're not abiding by the rules. I need to recoup that money, and here's the proof. And not only that, you can hire an attorney and ask that their attorney's fees be recouped as well for having to force
Okay.
them to go to court to enforce the orders.
Yeah, yeah. Make sure to stay organized is what I'm hearing for sure on in things like this. So what happens if one of the parents say they did, or both of them, they disagree on what qualifies as necessary childcare? What happens then?
Well, if they have attorneys, the attorneys are going to have a conversation about it. If they don't, and there's just a disagreement between the two parents, then you may need to go back to court to get clarity on the court and what the court defines as what is falling under that scope. But normally, if you have an order on mandatory add-ons, it's going to be very specific in those categories, right? I will say, though, one of the most infamous examples of where there's sometimes some tension is orthodontia work, right? It's usually very expensive, not always covered by insurance, so it is a lot of out-of-pocket costs. And one parent may say, well, I don't think it's necessary. They don't need braces. And then another parent may say, oh no, this, the orthodontist says they definitely need it. And then they go to court on this issue of, $5,000 dental bill.
Yeah.
I say that because I've actually had cases like that in the past, but yeah, I would say that's the most contested one, right? Is that issue? I think one of the other ones we haven't talked about yet, though, is therapy too. If a child
Oh,
has to do like speech therapy, occupational therapy, or even mental health therapy, those
mhm.
usually fall under mandatory add-ons as well.
Wow, wow. So then, how should parents request like a modification to reflect the new law that is happening?
Yeah, so if right now it's 50-50 and that's the current order that they have, and they know for sure the other parent it makes way more than them, it would need to be significantly more. So there's not a set rule, but my rule of thumb would be more than 20%. Like if they make, for example, one person makes $100,000, the other one makes $150,000 or $200,000 a year, it's worth it for you to go back to court because I bet you the calculation is going to say that the other parent needs to pay more than 50%, and that in return means you're paying less. I
So
think it
yeah.
also depends too,
Oh,
right? Like
mhm,
if your kids are young
yeah.
and you have high daycare costs, right? Like myself, I pay over $2,500 a month in daycare costs. I've got two littles. That would be worth it, right? If I were in that situation, God forbid. So to me, that would be worth it. But if all you're dealing with is maybe a few out-of-pocket co-pays for taking to the doctor a couple times a year, is it really worth it? I don't know. Probably not, right?
Mhm. So yeah, like I mean, as you were saying, this new rule, like if they wanted a modification because of it, does it affect these existing court orders?
So it doesn't you don't get to go back retroactively. It'll just be usually the court will say, okay, moving forward, effective X date, this is the new order of how those costs are allocated.
Oh, like so you couldn't go back and like try to get like money from the past, as I
No,
guess. Yeah, that makes.
retroactively, no. Mm-mm.
All right. Well then, Amanda, what is your advice for parents who didn't know this rule has changed?
I mean, I would say glad that you're listening to this podcast because this is an important law to know if you do have custody orders and child support orders in place and you're sharing custody with somebody else. And you should try to see if you can get information about the other person's income or if maybe you already kind of know and crunch the numbers. The best thing you can do though before going back to court is to talk to an attorney and they can run some general numbers on the software program The current software program is called Xspouse, and they can run the numbers to see, okay, based off of your estimates, this is kind of the ballpark of what you're saying each parent's making. This is what you're going to look at if you go to court. You never want to go to court and then it's not worth it, or maybe gosh forbid you put yourself in a position where you're paying more. So it's always best to kind of talk to somebody first, run the numbers, and see if it makes sense for you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that information. And thanks for joining us on navigating consumer and family law challenges. If you need help understanding how the new child care law impacts your support order, visit knhlawgroup.com and be sure to like, subscribe, and review the show to stay up to date on California's latest family law changes. And thank you so much for joining us again, Amanda. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.